I think we'll just go ahead and start, and anybody who trickles in will, yeah, they'll trickle in and catch up. Cool. So today is day 2 of Introduction to Quantum Computing. So we're yesterday was a lot of the academic infrastructure, trying to learn about what is quantum computing, what's a computer versus a quantum computer, how do they work, what are different modalities, learning some of the linear algebra, and feeling the pain of programming Atlas assembly language. Today is quite different. Today is kind of the future of quantum computing, right? What is the business value of quantum computing? What are people expecting from this? What are future programs doing that are making it easier to use quantum computers and utilize them, facilitate them, right? Take advantage of these larger quantum computers that are becoming available to us. So yesterday was kind of where we are today. Today's lecture is going to be on kind of or where we are tomorrow and in the future. Perfect, let's get started.
All right, so we will start with a very short recap for yesterday because we know it was very dense, very heavy, a lot of stuff we had to throw at you. So we'll just do a small recap on the things that will matter for today's discussion. Then we want to go a little bit about what Eric mentioned, the business value. How can we derive value with quantum computers? We'll do some market overview. Yesterday we just showed you some of the companies, their modalities, what they do. We'll get deeper into this. Then we have a section about awareness, readiness, and advantage. This is basically speaking about how you guys can go back to your organizations and how you can start to prepare and get ready to use quantum computers in order to move from this knowing that there is something called quantum computers to getting ready to actually making an advantage for your organization. At the end, we'll touch a little bit about algorithms, applications, how we develop it for quantum computers. Yesterday was tough to do it. Today it's supposed to be slightly easier. And we'll also touch a little bit about IP. What is patentable and not? Should you do it? How you do it? Why it matters for this specific use case? And at the end, we'll make a break, and then we'll do some more exercises, the hands-on part. But today we'll use Classics platform, and we hope that you will see the difference in how it felt yesterday and how it feels now. And Eric will tell a little bit about what are the vision for the company, or how we actually think we can even progress beyond that point. So yesterday was packed, right? They had a lot of things. We talked about some of the motivation and history, like why we even started thinking about quantum computers. We touched a little bit on the math. We talked about quantum mechanics, why it's unique and how it uses linear algebra actually to express mainly superposition and entanglement. We did a comparison between classical and quantum computers, right? How we build them and how we use them. So again, we'll make it fast, right? We talked about quantum computers and their power and advantage over classical computers. We talked about superposition, and we gave Schrodinger's cat as an example of being both dead and alive. We talked about entanglement and correlation. We used the shoes as an example. We talked about Hilbert space and how we kind of visualized a state of a qubit using Bloch sphere. And we touched a little bit about the problem with the wave function collapse when we do the measurements, how it influences the data, the system, everything gets classical. We lose the superposition, right? We need to choose between being dead or alive. When we talked about the quantum information side, we said that it kind of behaves differently. We mentioned the complexity classes, the fact that BQP this is what we are after at the moment. And we also touched, because we had a question, that there are some problems which are supposed to be hard even for a quantum computer. We showed how we write down circuitry and how we execute an algorithm, how it is actually implemented on a specific qubit, how it looks like, all the rotations and transitions. And we touched upon the fact that it matters what type of topology and system you're using. We'll see it more clearly today. The last thing we did, we spoke about like the different modalities that are in the market, the programming languages, and basically all the ecosystem that lives before and after just the QPUs that are here. All right?
All right. So the first thing you typically see about quantum computing is all the hype, right? There's a lot of news articles out there. There's a lot of blogs, and a lot of people talking about quantum security and worrying about encryption being broken with Shor's algorithm, or how it's going to solve the world energy crisis and all these kinds of things, right? So there's a ton of hype about what quantum computing can do. Some people are blowing it up. Some people say, oh no, it's not going to do anything. And so there's a lot of definitely a lot of PR and media about quantum computing out there, and that tends to be people's first, intro into, what is quantum computing, and maybe I should start looking into it since there's so much dialogue around it. Actually, this is a fun quote from a former U.S. Cyber Command from the NSA that says, quantum computing is a new strategic technology with wide-reaching implications. Quantum could be a game-changing differentiator when working with huge data sets and models that have numerous variables yet exhibit a high rate of change over time. And that's been the most true statement I've seen from somebody quoting and talking about quantum computing in some time. So that's one I like to bring up. But yeah, certainly, Wall Street Journal talks about this frequently. A lot of these, big articles in magazines and newspapers, you'll see it pop up every once in a while. But when we talk about, quantum, some of these news agencies kind of conflate a couple of concepts, right? Taking a step back, there's a couple of quantum technologies, and they're an ecosystem, right? We have quantum computing, which we're focusing in on this class, but there's also quantum communication and things like quantum sensing, right? There's a lot of things that the advancement of quantum research is enabling, right? One of these is quantum computing. Not all the things that are being talked about is quantum computing, and sometimes they get kind of mismatched. Right? Quantum communication is protocols to allow secure transfer of information. Right, that's kind of the quantum encryption as opposed to quantum decryption, and there's some really cool things you can do with quantum encryption. Right, one of my favorite kind of examples of a potential mode of securing data using quantum is using the fact that quantum behaves probabilistically. Right, there's that whole kind of thing where if you observe the quantum mechanical effect, it becomes classical. So if you're transferring some kind of data packet and you're transferring it quantum mechanically, you're transferring it probabilistically. If it arrives at the receiver quantum mechanically, you're good. If it is received and it's classical, you know that at some point during the data transfer, someone has tried to observe that data packet. And so you can stop your transmission immediately. You know that somebody's been trying to peer into that data. You can stop that and immediately know that your data is going to be secure. So there's interesting things you can do simply, using the physics of quantum to try and secure data. And there's tons of really cool protocols, even using, some of this spooky action at a distance effects to transfer information. A lot of people are coming up with really cool protocols for securing and transferring information, but there's also, very sensitive equipment coming out that's using quantum principles, and it's going to enable a whole host of technologies that are going to be quite fun in a few years. But why do we, one question that's asked frequently from reporters and quite a few people is, do we really need quantum computers, right? There's been a ton of technologies that have been developed, and they haven't come to fruition, right? The IBM Watson is a prime example of a technology that was developed, awesome technology, but it was a solution without a problem, right? Really cool thing got developed. Not a lot of traction happened with it. People sometimes call quantum machines, these Rube Goldberg machines. They do a lot of things, but at the end of the day, so what, right? You got a ball from A to Z. It did a lot of fun things along the way, but it ultimately got back to a starting point and didn't actually travel very far. And there's, I love your example from Dexter's Lab, where Dee Dee comments, searching for answers to questions that nobody asked. Right? Might be dating ourselves a little bit with Dexter's Lab. Does anybody watch Dexter's Lab here? All right, we got 1, 2. Okay, cool. Not too old. Good. Not yet. Excellent. And we talked about this a little bit, right? Another reason that we're looking into quantum, one of the main reasons, and the reason that why it's important, right? Where people ask, why are we looking at it? Is it important to look at? Absolutely. And the reason is that mathematically we can prove that there are a class of problems out there that quantum computers can solve faster, more efficiently than classical computers. Right, here's just a little bit more detailed explanation of kind of those diagrams we were showing yesterday, showing that NP space compared to your P problem. So P problems are problems that computers can easily solve and easily verify. NP problems are problems that can be easily verified but not necessarily easily solved. And quantum computers can do a little bit of that region and a little bit more even. So there is a class of problem that quantum computers can easily solve that classical computers have a lot of hard time solving. Maybe they can easily verify them, but solving it's the tricky part. Like prime number factorization is a key example of that. And right, there's a lot of really cool algorithms that have come out of this. People are trying to drive business value out of this, and there's right, we were talking about building quantum algorithms yesterday out of all these kinds of gates and logic and things like this. And so there's a fun chart here that was developed by McKinsey talking about what are some of the algorithms and what are the industries that they're going to benefit, and then to essentially what value, to what effect. So there's a lot of business savvy people trying to hook this up and generate business value out of these systems. Right, we mentioned yesterday, right, there's a right tool for every problem. You don't want to be using the wrong algorithm for trying to do something else. And some of the key industries, and you're going to hear this a lot during this lecture and see it a lot during the McKinsey reports and Boston Consulting Group reports, is that these are some of the prime industries that are going to see business value in the short term. We're going to see pharmaceuticals and healthcare, cybersecurity, logistics, finance, chemicals, automotive, and manufacturing. Those tend to be the big ones. So here's where it starts getting fun, at least for me, and talking about what are the dollar values out of this, right? Most of the major industry analysts say that we're going to see tremendous business value within the next 5 years, and certainly within the next 10, it's just going to keep growing. So here's a chart by McKinsey saying that by 2035, we're going to have between these couple of use cases, we're going to see business value up to $700 billion. And we can see kind of a chart on where those business values are coming from. And large in part, right, we see finance is the largest industry size, but also some of the largest value too, right? So again, right, we're seeing pharmaceuticals being there. We see, manufacturing, chemicals, finance, all those same industries that we're going to see that business value out of. And even though, right, we see financial industry with kind of a lighter color economic value, even if you increase a financial application, the efficiency of it by, 0.2%, that's billions of dollars to somebody investing or optimizing stock portfolios. And Boston Consulting Group agrees with all the things that McKinsey reports are saying. Right, their projections are between 450 billion to 850 billion within the next 15 to 30 years, and estimate that companies and governments could capture 5 to 10 billion of that within the next 3 to 5 years. So that's awesome, and why technologies and companies are looking into this today. There is short-term revenue generation that can occur, and if you're not looking into it today, you might lose out on that. So here, right, we see some of these algorithms, right, simulations, machine learning, optimization, cryptography, and the applications, and some of the value creation coming out of it, kind of the low and the high projections from it. And a great analogy, right, is, was there a question? Yeah.
I think yesterday you talked about certain business problems that quantum computing could solve. Could you give us some more tangible business statements, maybe the more industry specific where quantum computing is important?
Absolutely, right. So let's see, there's quite a bunch of fun use cases. Let me think about, let's stick with some industry verticals, right? If we're looking at, manufacturing, there's a couple of applications, right? There's certainly logistics in shipping routes, because quantum computers are really good at solving optimization problems. Trying to find, essentially, you develop your quantum algorithms to find kind of the minimum energy state. And when you're trying to figure out what the shortest route is between different, ports or houses or, from your shipping facility to all these other distribution centers, that's a minimization problem. How do you minimize that route distance? And so quantum computers are really good at solving that kind of problem. Also, manufacturing can see quite a few applications from the simulation of quantum systems, and that way you can do interesting material development. You can have materials developed with higher strength to weight ratios, right? One of the fun examples I like to talk about is spider silk. We know what spider silk's made out of, right? It's not a mystery. We know what chemicals are made, we know what it is, what it's comprised of. We've never been able to replicate it. But it's not that we don't know what the constituent parts is, we just don't know how to put it together quite right? We need to simulate this. We need fundamental quantum mechanical simulations if we want to simulate some of these really cool materials that we're finding in nature, right? We know what they are, but how do we put them together in a way that we can reproduce ourselves?
On this one, Eric, I can give like a real life example. My background is in materials engineering, and the professor that I worked with when I did my master's degree, she specializes in computational materials and simulation of materials. And for now, because we just have classical computers, we use the university supercomputers, and it takes like 48 hours to simulate a system with 50 atoms. That's it. And then you need to use tricks, and you kind of like, you solve for 50 atoms, and then you kind of stitch it together like a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle, and now you have a big system, but it's not very accurate to do it. Once you want to move beyond 50 atoms, everything falls apart. You just can't handle all this information. But 50 atoms, you can, if you want to talk about like their position and their momentum and their spins and everything, 200 qubits, 300 qubits. So scaling up there gives you a lot of advantage, right? To try out new stuff. Think about like every small change, you just want to change an atom's position, 48 hours gone, right?
So it seems to me that quantum computing is more relevant mainly for large conglomerates. Is that right to say? Because I'm thinking a startup or like a mid-sized company wouldn't just be able to justify the economic cost of using a quantum computing.
Oh,
So as a result, you might just fall back on, say, very basic data analytics or even like R to solve optimization problems.
Yeah, I would definitely say that that's not quite the case, because I mean, I'll show, even probably go on the web and show AWS's system. You have your prices right on the web page. It's pennies per the minute. It's not that expensive to utilize quantum computers, right? If you want to buy one, that's large conglomerates, right? If you want to buy one, leave that to the finance industry, who might want a quantum computer right next to their computers for kind of speed of data transfer, probably. But if you're a startup trying to look at how can I utilize quantum computing, it's not that expensive to get started to use quantum computers and kind of leverage that today.
Got it. And just one more follow-up question, right? I mean, just because I read an understanding of quantum computing, so I draw a lot of parallels with data analytics, right? Obviously not the same. But there are parallels. But what I see in the data world itself, there's this thing called low code, no code these days. So low code, no code, right? So in the past, there's people seeing data and data analytics skill set, but now it becomes so much easier to just code it as a layman, right? Because everything is written in words. Do you think such a trend would show up in quantum computing, where eventually people need not have that skill set in quantum computing, but instead quantum computing becomes much more simplified for a layman to use it?
Okay, so if I had to prognosticate and kind of see the future here, I definitely in the short term, we're getting programs and applications that are making using quantum computers easier, right? We're abstracting it and getting further away from the hardware coding itself, like we did yesterday. I mean, certainly that's what my company does, one aspect of it at least. And right, as far as getting to a no-code situation, I'm not sure we'll be there. I'm not sure we'll get to that level of abstraction, in the same reason that we don't have no-code GPU programming, right? For a CPU, something that you're going to use every day in front of you as part of like your word processing and things like that, I can definitely see the need for low-code, no-code. But if you're trying to do something that's in this, HPC infrastructure, we said, quantum computing is looking like it's going to be incorporated into this high-powered computing infrastructure with supercomputers. It's going to be a developer figuring out, should I use a CPU, GPU, TPU, or the quantum processing unit, now QPUs. And so, right, the same reason there's no-code TPUs out there, right? You can't easily do that without actually using Python or programming languages. I don't project there being no code quantum computers out there or quantum programming languages. I could be proven wrong in a few years, but that would be my prognostication. We'll get easier, absolutely, where it's much easier to program this in the same way that it's, we're using Python for CPU and GPU, and we'll get there, right, to these abstracted layers of programming. But the no code, I'm not sure will be there. Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking about applications in general, right? We can just quickly go through a couple, right? We talked about simulations of quantum systems. That's also not just for material development, but for medical, pharma, drug discovery, right? How do you simulate? How does a protein interact with a human enzyme? We can go ahead and simulate that, and have vaccines develop much faster, drug discovery happening much faster. Because right now it's just trial and error, right? A lot of pharma scientists, they're spending time in the lab doing trial and error experiments. Will this work? No, they have trays of hundreds of these experiments going on and seeing which one of these is going to hit. In the future, I can definitely see pharmaceutical scientists spending more time using quantum computers and being on a computer than they are in the lab doing experiments by hand. And those, just two industries we talked about. We talked about pharma, we talked about logistics, but there's also, right, finance is a big one. We talked about that the other day about how it can be used for credit risk analysis. It can be used for portfolio optimization. A lot of cool applications there. And I'm sure we'll hit on some more in the future in a couple of slides.
I think just before that, there are two ways you can think about using this technology, right? You can think about the verticals, right? What can I do with this technology for finance? And then you go about all the things that financial industry is doing, and you try to map some of these problems to see whether there is a justification to use a quantum computer. The other way you can go about it is horizontally, right, across. So you say, I specialize in developing quantum machine learning algorithms. And then you start hunting for people that use machine learning in their everyday activities, and you want to show them that using my quantum machine learning algorithms will give you a certain benefit. So it will either run faster, it will be more accurate, it requires less data to train it.
Yeah, and certainly, right, looking at it this way is why you see some of these articles coming out saying that, quantum will solve, the energy crisis or things like that, because, well, quantum can have applications. Quantum can have applications in, developing better batteries, right? There's, with, quantum machine learning, you're going to have better weather forecasting. There's a lot of applications of having faster algorithms in these certain fields.
Could these faster algorithms be implemented for the general public? Like, will I have in my lifetime a quantum computer on my desk, or is that not very efficient? Or there's like you can't really like cool whatever it's just sub-zero or the absolute zero or whatever. But is there a theoretical application for the general population? Or
as far as having a personal quantum computer, that depends on which modality of quantum computing ends up winning out in this whole race, right? Certainly, the ones being used today, some of the more popular ones like superconducting qubits, require ultra-low temperatures. We're not going to see personal ultra-low temperature systems sitting on your desk. But there are a couple of modalities. There's photonic devices, right? They're using light and nonlinear crystals. You don't need ultra-low temperatures for light, right? You can scale that down to a point where it could be local, right, in your house. I believe there's also a modality like quantum dots is very scalable.
The NV centers in diamonds that we mentioned, they also don't require. And in general, I think about 6-7 months ago, we hosted Paul Lipman. He is the president of a company called Quanta. Now they changed to Inflection, but he showed us their QPU, and it's like the size of this remote control, right? It's that small, and it's because their technology allow them to build it, and they don't need a lot of components and surrounding to support. So it really depends on what we have in the future. But think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense the way that the things are going now using cloud services, right? Because you have your personal computer to do small stuff that you need right now, right? But even if you are like 3-member startup and you want to develop something, you'll probably deploy it on some kind of a cloud-based service, right? The same things will probably happen here because they have like this thing that once the computer, like they used to say about the IBM servers and this kind of stuff, once it leaves the facility, it's already obsolete, right? By the time it will get to you, you will install it, you will have everything up and running, there is a new model, right? So
Yeah. It's very folding. Folding great.
Absolutely.
Is there any parallel in terms of speed and power between classical computing and quantum? So for instance, that like 50 atom problem we're talking about that takes 48 hours, is there any parallel for how fast a quantum system could solve that?
Parallel is a hard one to say. It's the same way that you can say, is there a parallel like a QPU versus CPU? It can do different things, and it's better for certain things than others. And you could talk about it like that, right? I can use a quantum computer to solve certain algorithms much faster than their classical counterpart. It's not the same program. They do, at the end of the day, they'll get you a solution that you are looking for ultimately, but it's a whole different way of programming, whole different way of getting to that solution. You can do benchmarking on that, and actually that's a big topic of today is how do you benchmark quantum computers and kind of the whole drama and fight about which way of benchmarking should we use, and some companies are saying let's use this benchmarking because it makes their computers look better, things like this. And so different people will claim like my computer is the best one based on this benchmark. It's like, well, just because you have the most qubits doesn't mean that they're good qubits or long-lived qubits, not noisy. Some have very small qubits or very few qubits, but they're super long-lived, really well-designed, robust qubits. And so, benchmarking is difficult.
there is one way which is kind of agnostic to power requirements, electricity, and all this kind of stuff. For some of the algorithms, there is this, in computer science, big O notation. Right? It says like, if I have one input to the system, how long will it take it to run? If now I scale it to 2, 3, 5, n inputs, how will it scale? And for some problems, you can show, at least mathematically, that you require less resources to do it. Whether those resources, if you translate it to electricity and space and cost and all that kind of stuff, whether it's still cost efficient, we need to see. But for some problems, you can show that, at least on paper, it's much faster.
Yeah, actually, I've been talking about quantum Monte Carlo so much that I have this these numbers in my head. I know, right? The confidence interval for a Monte Carlo simulation, right? You want that as small as possible, so you know your answer is correct. Scales as 1 over the number of time steps that you have that it takes to get there. For a quantum Monte Carlo, it's 1 over the square root of the number of time steps, and so you get to a smaller confidence interval much faster for the same number of time steps. So you can show mathematically, definitively, that the quantum analog to that classical computation just scales faster. Yeah.
So, if I may add, I'm Parminder from AWS. I think the way to look at the speed up is based on two aspects, right? Whether you have the hardware to solve that exact problem, or you have an efficient algorithm. And one of the famous examples which we often give is by Peter Shor on the encryption of cryptography, right? And then that is based on the RSA encryption, and the whole of this idea, like encryption is unbreakable in classic versus quantum computer will break is based on this thesis, or you have a large number, you need to factor it and all that, you don't have enough resources, so my classic side encryption is safe and sound. But when the quantum Q-day or quantum day or Q-day will come, all of that can be broken. And that is based on the information theory, on the complexity theory with which we saw there. But can a classical algorithm also can break the RSA encryption? Not yet, but I'm positive someone will come up with that algorithm. But whole thing is based on like how your problem is difficult to solve if your problem size grows. And this growing of the problem size is exponential. If you think about some of the algorithm on the factorization versus, there is another one like a Grover search, which is like searching for an item in a list which is unstructured, whether you get a speed up. There is a quadratic speed up, and there is a nice archive paper if you search like what is Grover, how the speed up. Just wanted to mention those.
And so, if anybody doesn't know, this is Parminder Singh of AWS, one of our panelists for tomorrow. So start thinking of really hard questions for him. Give me the easy ones. So just getting back to what we're talking about here, this was just kind of a fun slide saying, right, you could think about quantum computing and the applications of quantum computing like the iPhone. If anybody remembers when the iPhone first came out, or I might be dating myself again, but if anybody remembers when that was coming out, everyone's like, what are we going to do with this thing, right? It's kind of like the iPhone when it came out, or the iPad even. You know, there's this device.
iPod with cellular coverage.
Yeah, exactly. There was a couple of devices that came out. What am I even going to do with this? Why do people want this? I can't see an application for it. Okay, maybe it's a little bit more convenient. And then jump to today, there's more applications than we could ever have imagined there being for these devices, right? There was a cool technology out there, ended up being a platform for people to put their imaginations on and come up with really cool things. And quantum computing is going to be much the same, right? We're coming up with these really cool technologies, and people much smarter than I are going to come up with really awesome applications for business value, for personal reasons, for weather updates and things like that, right? I could imagine going outside and my weather app updating in the second instead of by the hour or something like that. All these weather predictions. It's going to be a really cool future. Market overview.
Right. So as the saying goes, follow the money. Right. If there is money, there's probably a reason for it. Right. So here again, taking from McKinsey slide, you can see that just in the second half of 2022, we had something like $1.24 billion of private investments in startups going to quantum computing. There are a lot of more announcements from governments pouring money into quantum technologies. There are a lot of governmental initiatives. For example, you have here in the US, you have the EU, the UK has their own thing, Israel has some. So many countries are realizing that you need to start spending money at the government level because it's really high capital intensive industry just to get things up and running. And as you can see, if we can believe this trend, right, the future is bright. So this is where you want to invest, this is where you want to be.
I'll just add, if anybody's been keeping up with laws and things being passed, right, the CHIPS Act that came out a while ago, it was a lot of trying to build the U.S. infrastructure to make sure we have, U.S. bases to build a lot of our computer parts ourselves. But there was a bunch in there of funding for quantum computing kind of thrown in. So there was quite a bit of funding. The U.S. is also now investing in quantum computing. They see this as part of what they need to do to invest in computer development in general.
Actually, now that you mentioned it,
Yeah.
I think it was the end of last year, around November, the US government announced a new bill called Strategic and Emergent Technologies, and quantum computing and quantum machine learning and all this kind of stuff fall underneath this new bill. And it's part of the things they did to emphasize the importance of this technology is the fact that everyone related to this industry can get a green card, apply for a green card, a speed up trail. You don't need all these documents, all this kind of stuff. You don't even need a job. You just need to be part of this industry. Right, and you can apply for a green card. This is how important the US government sees this technology and just keeping ahead of the curve. All right, so we said there is a lot of money going into it, but how does it break down, where the money is coming from? So we see that governments and venture capitals, they are the biggest investors. So you have, if we look at it, we kind of can break it down into tier levels, and we have a nice breakdown like by government support, by private initiatives, and who invests in developing this talent, where the talent is coming from. So the US is leading in terms of its quality and quantity of universities and programs that you have. But if you look at the governmental investments, China definitely leads ahead, the European Union second, and the US kind of short behind. So they are putting less money from the government, but you have a lot of money coming from investors. So VCs, a lot of VCs are putting money into quantum technologies. Here at MIT, we have the Engine, if you heard about it. It's kind of MIT's VC. They also invest in some companies. There's one startup that came out from MIT, Atlantic Computing, a while ago. There is another one, Boston Computing, coming out right now.
Zapata as well.
Zapata, they are several years now in the market. They are mainly from Harvard, but they have some MIT guys with them. But yeah, they also came with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So as you can see, a lot of money is coming both from the government and private investors. Corporates themselves, the big ones at least, also need to invest in it. AWS is an example. They have the classical computing services, but you had to do some adjustment to accommodate for the needs of quantum computers, to connect with those new vendors, to think about how you can make it more approachable and let people use it. It's already difficult, so let's at least make this part easier. So mainly governments, they realize that it's strategic, so they invest. VC invest because they see the potential and growth. And as long as money is still coming in, there is hope that eventually we'll hit all those roadmaps, milestones that we mentioned yesterday, right? So scaling up, trying to combat the noise, hopefully getting to a fault-tolerant computer in the future. Now, yesterday we talked about some of the challenges. We want to highlight some of the specific ones, like the critical ones. Bless you. So the first one is just scaling the hardware. We said that we have, this is an example, we have IBM Quantum Roadmap. The good thing about them is that so far they hit every milestone. For 2022, they did the same. They released, every time that they say they will release a bigger QPU, they actually delivered on it. They also work on the software side of things, but like we said, scaling hardware, getting it to a size which means something and we can do with it, this is the main challenge for now. Second thing, talent shortage. Like we mentioned yesterday that universities are now starting to have more and more degrees and programs geared toward quantum computing. Actually, I heard from a guy here at MIT, he said that today, if you will graduate with a PhD in quantum technologies, you can get a professorship, tenureship immediately, instantly. You just graduate from your PhD, you say that you want to stay, they will give you an office, they will let you hire new PhDs, new masters. And it's just that because they realize there are not enough people to satisfy the market need for workforce. And for you guys, they need not just 10 people, they also need like business people. Companies now realize they need program managers, marketing, all this kind of operation that need to go about, all this kind of stuff. So the business side is also at need. And if you'll start Googling for jobs and stuff, you will see in the job description that they realize that not all the people have the knowledge required at the moment. Still, they want you to apply. And if they'll hire you, they will teach you whatever you need to learn. They help you ramp up. But there is a need for both STEM and business people in this field.
I mean, that right graph says everything, right? The number of active jobs is almost always way higher than the number of people graduating and looking for jobs. So if you have quantum experience, quantum backgrounds, you're going to get hired immediately, right? You can be leading quantum teams, be, the spear point for your company's quantum initiative. And honestly, right, I talked to a lot of software developers and software engineers who are thinking, should I get into quantum? Okay, absolutely, right? If you have a year of programming in quantum computing, you're an expert, right? The industry hasn't been around long enough for somebody to ask for, 4 years of C++ experience and Python. No, if you have 1 year, you are the expert. So you can immediately get a lot of clout, a lot of good credentials, and be really important in your company and pretty high up immediately by having the skill set.
Barrier for entrance, right? We saw it yesterday. It's not easy to code for a quantum computer. Yesterday we played around with a single qubit, then we moved to 2 qubits. We had an example that uses 4 qubits. But these are some screenshots from the classic platform. You can see that for 5 qubits, yeah, you can still do it manually. But this is how a circuit for 25 qubits looks like. And this is way more. All right. And think about just going and plugging each gate and connecting it to each qubit. And just, not making the human error of, I need to connect this one to that one, or maybe this one, and what happened if I accidentally push it one line above, then I messed up everything, basically. So definitely programming is difficult at the moment, and we need to simplify that. And the last thing, Rich, to your question is, okay, we have all those kind of companies, they are developing their own systems. I want to start using it. Which one should I choose? Right? The way you go about it, if you want to buy a new laptop, you'd say, do I want to buy AMD or Intel? Let's say I go with Intel. Do I want to spend on an i5, i7, maybe less? Okay, how fast does it clock? How much RAM do I have? And basically this is it. This is the parameters that you're looking for. So you have kind of benchmarks that we all agree that are meaningful when we want to make this decision. In this case, it's still an open question. So you see that there are benchmarks coming from different companies and institutes and universities as well. And you can kind of put them on a scale of how much they benchmark the system itself or how much they benchmark the application when you use it, right? Each has its pros and cons. They account for some stuff, they don't account for other stuff. Still, it's an open question. There is no one way to say company A is doing it much better than company B, right? Sometimes you just need to give it a try. It really depends on what you are looking for and what you're trying to achieve from using a quantum computer. So it might seem like a niche problem, but it's kind of very at the heart of the problem now. Like, which one should I choose? Which one should eventually lead the market and remain? Is it just because I did better marketing and people like the name and the logo? Or is it because I am actually better than my competition?
I'll just add, it feels to me a little bit like GPU benchmarking, right? Like, oh, this GPU is really good at this, benchmarking score, but well, that one doesn't use, as many shadow tests or something like that, and so it's actually really cruddy on this other benchmark. And different people and GPU vendors will benchmark on different systems, and there's always that kind of fight. What's it testing actually? And it's good for that and bad for that, and there's pros and cons for every kind of benchmark test.
It happened with Intel too. So Intel uses a benchmark called Sysmark to show how the performance improves. AMD uses Cinebench because it's designed to be better on the system that you are actually testing. So it's kind of cheating, but it's still, this is the way it is. So we touched on this one. I used the example of the CPU and the different benchmarks, but the idea is it's still an open question. We still don't know what are the key parameters that we should look for and how we should decide which one to use other than try it out at the moment. This is the best we can do.
All right.
There we go.
Thank you. All right, awareness, readiness, and advantage, right? So let's make sure we define these if we're all on the same page, right? Awareness is knowing that these technologies exist, right? Readiness is dedicating your organization and understanding the technology, right, and getting ready for it, making sure that you're prepared. And advantage is using it, taking advantage of it, benefiting from it, right? So these are kind of the three steps that all companies will go through in using quantum technology or in any technology, right? This is kind of the technology roadmap, right? If you're trying to come up with your digital transformation strategy, there's always awareness, readiness, advantage. You have to go through these steps. But what does it take to get through these? Certainly, I hear from most anybody who talks to me about quantum computing always ask, when will it matter, right? When should I start looking into this? How should I start looking into this? And we actually did a poll. Our company, Classic, did a poll for about over 500 professionals from companies with more than 100 employees. And it was a whole range of industries we pulled, and we found that at least the popular opinion from industry is that we're going to see the output of quantum technology, informing their everyday decision policies within the next 5 years. Well, actually, it's already 2023. Wow, time's escaping. So within the next couple of years, most everybody's saying it's going to affect us. That's what businesses are thinking today. So right, the question is, if they think it's going to be happening so quickly, when should we start preparing, right? Well, the answer is now. I always tell companies, right, they ask, when should we start looking into this, right? Quantum's, McKinsey and BCG say it's going to be coming out, 2025 and things like that. Should I be looking today? When should I be looking? So I always like to use the analogy of planting a tree, right? When's the best time to plant a tree? The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. So if you haven't started looking into quantum computing already, that maybe you should have started a month or two ago at least, start investigating it now, because there's a lot of companies already investigating it, big into it. There's all these projections saying that within the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be billions of dollars of extractable revenue for those who use quantum computing applications. Right, Gartner is predicting that nearly 40% of large enterprises will have quantum computing initiatives underway by 2025. And certainly our poll showed that 86% of industries are already, or 86% of the people we polled are already hiring quantum computing talent. And these bars are actually quite surprising for us. We had a poll, is your organization investing in quantum computing technology and or research right now? And almost all of them had over 50% said, yes, we started, or yes, I would consider us an advanced user. So that's way more than I was expecting. Right, and certainly the highest up there is banking, finance, services, right? So 33% is saying that they're already considering themselves advanced users of quantum computing, with 54% of that saying, yes, they've already started. So quite a few industries are investigating this in big ways already today, and if you're asking this question of when should I start, you're already kind of behind the 8 ball, right? You gotta, let's start now, let's begin this process. Right, so there's the trinity of emerging technology. I love your language for that one. That was fun. Right, so similar to any new emerging technologies, there's always 3 main camps of investing in it. Right, the technology developers and providers. There's the end users, and of course there's the venture capitalists, the investors who are pumping that money in also. Right, and all 3 of these camps work towards this advantage. Right, so there's these steps aren't mutually exclusive. You need all these 3 camps to work together to come up and develop this technology, right? It's great to be a developer, but if you don't have funding, you're not going to go anywhere. If you're a venture capitalist with nothing to fund, that's great. You have money, but it's not going anywhere. And if you have a product with no use case, you're not going to sell anything, right? So you need all 3 of these to have a proper, innovation startup ecosystem in general for any technology. Aha! Okay, there we go. Pressing the laser pointer. All right, so technology providers, the core, right? So you need to have maintain a clear and transparent roadmap, determine the core business model of the market, right? So there's the core of your technology is figuring out that vision, right? You need to figure out what are the problems in quantum computing that are solvable, right? You need to figure out, is your industry something that's going to be taking advantage of quantum computing in the short term? What problems can quantum computing solve? Which ones should I start investigating, and how do I start going ahead and prioritizing these kinds of problems? Typically, when companies start working in this industry and start investigating it, they want to do kind of a proof of concept. What do I start investigating? How do I investigate this? And typically, it's a good idea to start on this technology, start using quantum computing. Maybe partner with a company that knows what they're doing, or start a skunkworks team to start investigating this. And some of those first steps are often, for most of the businesses that certainly I've worked with, it's to benchmark a quantum computing solution to something that they know, a known variable, a known value. So they'll do the quantum analog to an algorithm that they know very well. They know what the solution should be. So when they run it on a quantum computer, they want to see, do I get the same answer? What does it look like? How do I use the computer to get to that same point? They start getting confidence in this. Okay, I am getting the same value. I see that this is getting me that output. I can also show this to management, right? This is a technology that is working. We know how to use it, and we're ready for it when it does approach. Right? And that's a lot of that justification, right? So we need to, partners with a vendor. Yep. A lot of what I was talking about, right? When you're looking at this kind of technology, it's often useful to partner with somebody who understands the industry, who can walk you through that roadmap of saying, right, don't try and make a Zoom application on a quantum computer. That's not useful right now. That's probably going to be an impossible task. But here are the problems that you can use and solve with a quantum computer. They can help steer you. They can help you understand the technology, use the technology, and figure out, how do you transfer your algorithms that you're using today into their quantum analogs, right? Because we saw that's not a trivial task, right? If you are trying to project a Gaussian distribution, how do you map that into your qubits? How do you map that into your initiation state, right? So there's easy ways and nice ways to translate your Gaussian distributions, your normal distributions into your quantum computing problems, but sometimes it does take a little bit of assistance to figure that step out. How do you walk through that path? So certainly many companies do start proof of concepts or have kind of these fun, 3 to 5 people teams just going and rolling with it and investigating it. In fact, one of my favorite stories I've heard from quantum computing wasn't that a company wasn't even starting developing quantum computing themselves. They had a skunkworks team investing and investigating quantum technologies, not to patent anything, not to develop technologies themselves, but to understand the applications of quantum computing so they can educate the rest of their company's departments so that when they invent anything new, the company knew that, okay, this technology might have a quantum application. Let's add that to the patent claims language, right? They're trying to educate what are the future applications of quantum technology so they can go ahead and educate everybody else for these kind of future initiatives. And investors, right? You need to have this capital, right? Investment is terribly important. You need to understand the technology. Again, partnering is very important to have this understanding. Sometimes venture capitalists will partner with a company just to have that and gain that understanding. You need to analyze the market and landscape to follow that value creation, right? Conduct risk burnout analysis, always very important, and diligence. But as far as capital, right, you need to have this kind of investment to go ahead and fuel the industry, right? That's why we're seeing so much push recently from a number of government agencies to fund themselves. We've been mostly focused on venture capital funding for quantum computing for quite some time, but now we're seeing tremendous input from governments to go ahead and fuel and invest this industry. And there's some good reasons why we're starting to see so much investment into it, right? We saw the venture capitalists come in first. Now we're seeing government agencies come into it. And that's because a lot of the risk has been removed from the investment of quantum computing. It's no longer this kind of 5-qubit system. Will it bring value? Will it not bring value? Will it actually be a thing or not? Is it going to be a blip and it dies and goes away forever, right? But there are companies like IBM who've kept to their benchmark and surprised quite a few people by keeping to their benchmark to the year, right? Actually, 2023 they just came out this year. Was this year? A couple of months ago, I saw Condor. They're 1,121 qubits to the number. They came out with that computer, so they're keeping to their benchmarks. And a lot of people thought that at some point we would hit a quantum winter or some kind of impassable problem that we couldn't advance or get past, and we haven't hit it, to everyone's surprise, right? Even people in the industry were expecting there'd be something, some kind of roadblock we wouldn't get past. And we've just been hitting benchmark after benchmark after benchmark. I mean, knock on wood, we keep doing that. But we've been keeping to all of these projections, and investors are seeing this. Okay, this is a much safer technology to invest in, together with promises kept and the value creation that all these analysts are saying. Okay, maybe it's time for me to start putting value into this, right? Let's start taking advantage of this before before all these companies hit IPO and it becomes very difficult to buy stocks and invest in this.
And some companies
Yeah.
went public, right? So
Yes.
you can invest in IonQ, Rigetti, D-Wave. There's another one. I think there are some companies which are already public. They are dedicated just to quantum computing. Of course, you can buy Amazon stocks, but then you're indirectly investing in this technology. But there are at least 4 companies you can directly invest in quantum computing companies.
It's very cool stuff, right? And we're going to see more of that coming up, right? We saw the tremendous funding going into startups. It's increasing astronomically, and that's because, right, the industry is growing. These promises are kept, and we're going to see that continuing to grow. And I'm very excited for it personally.
The other point is venture capitalists, sometimes we see them as like a for-profit Silicon Valley investor giving up funds for the startups. The biggest venture capitalists, as far as we can take quantum as US Gulf, Canada, Gulf, and you touched on the point like the bills or some of the important legislations that passed last year. There was one on December 22nd when we all were busy with Christmas. One bill was passed by President Biden. It was about preparing all the agencies, federal, state, for this quantum migration. So he has given all the agencies 6 months, and they need to come up with a plan how they are going to migrate all of the state or the federal agencies to the quantum. Now, this tells us about the seriousness of this matter, because one way to look at this is a race. If we all are young, we didn't see like space race or a nuclear race. It was before our time. But this is one of the most important things which will happen in the 20th century is the quantum race. That's why all of this, including the Europe, Australian, any other governments, they are putting a lot of funding into this because there is the implication that in national security, all of the encryption can be broken. That means like autonomous car we are driving on the phone, everything can be all open, credit cards. So it's kind of like criticality factor is top, the cryptography and encryption and all. That's why there's a lot of funding is coming. And this law, you guys can read about this law called as Cyber Security Preparedness Act, and it was done like December 22nd, I think. So that was one of the points, like not only the private for-profit, but sometimes government agencies are the biggest venture capitalists.
Absolutely, right? The dialogue around security is another huge reason why governments are funding this. Absolutely, right? There's also promises kept, kind of reduced risk. Along with that reduced risk, this is a much more real technology for a lot of people. Okay, this is coming, and there is a security risk, and so you're seeing tremendous funding from a number of government agencies. But one thing I do want to talk about is this kind of misnomer about quantum security. A lot of people panic about quantum security and that it's going to break Shor's encryption, and it's a very sexy topic for a lot of PR articles coming out. But really, there's a certain class of business that needs to worry about it, and everybody else can relax for a little bit. And when NIST changes their standards and says everybody move to this new encryption method, move with them. But the risk to your company depends on how long or how viable your data is, right? If your data is useful for 3 years only, don't worry about it, right? If you're in real estate, you don't have to worry about this. If you're a government contractor, if you're a bank, and your data is useful for over 10 years, right, that it has value over 10 years, that's the thing you need to worry about. Because there's a concept of kind of this take now, decrypt later. So bad actors out there are gathering a lot of data, encrypted data. They can't do anything with it today, but they're just gathering it so that when computers are at a point where they can break encryption within a reasonable amount of time, that's when they'll break it, and then they'll see all that information that they gathered, 5 years ago. So if your data is useful for more than 5 years, really start looking into this. There are a number of companies that will help you transition to new encryption methods today. Certainly a lot of banks are already doing this and figuring out, cataloging all of their programs, what encryption methods are we using? Let's make sure we switch this over and make sure that we are secure. So that's kind of the companies that need to worry about it. It's not everybody. It is certainly a large portion of the industry that does need to worry about it, but not everybody has to panic about this at once. And certainly, I've never in my lifetime had somebody tell me that they're going to hack my data in 5 years. That's a great warning for somebody to give you, right? So you have time to prepare. You have things that you can do for somebody telling me that they're going to steal your information in 5 years. Usually, I hear that got an email that my data has been taken, 2 weeks ago, and we're very sorry. Here's some kind of, apology email. But there's also two sides to this security issue, right? There's quantum decryption that we're talking about, that you hear a lot about this when people talk about quantum security. But that's quantum decryption, right? That's Shor's algorithm able to break RSA encryption, right? That's NIST trying to come up with new standards for what is the protocol that we should kind of gather around that's both a difficult encryption method for classical and quantum computers to break. But then, like we talked about earlier with other quantum technologies, quantum sensing, quantum communication, there's some really cool quantum encryption protocols going out there that you can encrypt your data quantum mechanically. You can secure your data using quantum mechanics in some really cool and interesting ways. So while quantum can hurt security, it's absolutely going to benefit security as well. So people like to talk about all the negative security aspects of it, but in the long run, we're going to have more secure systems than we've ever had before because of quantum computing.
All right.
Just to backtrack again, this might be knowledge.
Yeah.
Basically, you said the idea of benchmarking, it's difficult to benchmark. Is the understanding correct where if I'm using a particular platform, it's hard for me to transition to another platform? So let's say if I'm using, company A to, code out my quantum computing, is it difficult for me to then switch to another provider if it's cheaper?
Right now, if you're programming at the assembly language, absolutely, right? Because fundamentally, programming these different computers require different languages. So transferring that language is difficult, but...
So does that mean I'm just thinking long-term about capital, about investment, does it mean this is a winners-take-all industry?
Winner-take-all industry. Now, I think there's going to be a couple of quantum vendors that are going to be able to survive in the same ecosystem, right? I don't think it's going to be, one modality wins out and that's it. We're probably going to have a couple surviving, at least that's my guess at it, right? We're going to have probably superconducting qubits and maybe something that scales much smaller than superconducting qubits, so we can have maybe more portable devices, right? We're going to find niche applications where somebody wants these giant hulking cloud-based systems and maybe somebody wants a smaller quantum computing system for a different reason. I could definitely see a couple of these modalities surviving at the same time and a couple of companies surviving at the same time. But certainly not every company can survive because at some point all the OEM manufacturers need to circle around a couple of technologies so there can be the industry to fuel the growth and development of more and more quantum computers.
Yeah, and so when you say government is investing a lot in this, is also government then would one day standardize the language that's used across quantum vendors so that you have that scalability and it's also lower cost?
That's actually something that's happening very recently. And the last conference I went to was the first time I saw individuals from standards institutes at these quantum conferences, and they're starting these dialogues, exactly. How do we standardize the way we're talking about it? How do we standardize the way we program this? Because right now it's kind of all over the place. But we're starting to see government agencies enter these dialogues, enter these conferences, start talking with companies on figuring out, can we get like a consortium? Can we get these groups together and come to some kind of agreement on the way we're all doing this together so that we can advance even faster altogether?
So until that happens, is there, which of the languages do you, if someone is to take on this and learn, where do you suggest someone begins?
Okay. It depends on where you are and your purposes for it. Certainly, if you're a PhD physicist and you're in quantum and interested in that, most start with Qiskit, kind of IBM's infrastructure, to learn kind of what we did yesterday. What's a bit, how do you rotate it, how do you move it around? For those in business who want to abstract business value out of it, certainly I have never programmed at the assembly language. I don't ever plan to outside of quantum computing. And in the same way, I don't anticipate most people who simply want business value out of quantum computing to program at the assembly language, right? There are programs out there that are already facilitating, right, my company and others, right? We're not the only name in the game that are trying to make it easier to program quantum computers. Start off with one of those applications that make it easier to get into the industry. You don't need so much foundational knowledge to start programming quantum computers. That tends to be the entry point we tell a lot of companies to go into, right? It's nice to have some of this foundational knowledge. We often recommend reading some of these books, short books, tell you kind of some of these concepts, maybe go to one of these lectures where you get all of this basics, but certainly you don't need a degree in it. You don't need to take, a whole semester's course. Understand some of the basics and then take advantage of it with some of these higher programming language applications.
A couple of points to add. First of all, people already realize that it's problematic when you program for something and you're limited just to this specific hardware, right? It used to be the case in the early days of classical computers, right? When you wrote your code and you can only run it on an IBM system or only on a Macintosh, and you had to know specifically how your system worked. And even if you programmed for a Macintosh one and there is new generation coming out, it might not be compatible, so you had to update everything every time. And now we have this notion of like agnostic coding, right? You just write your program, the compiler needs to figure out how to adjust it for an Intel CPU, for an AMD CPU. Probably the same thing, kind of what part of what Classic is doing is trying to abstract it. I think on bracket system, you can also use a programming language, choose a different vendor, and the transpiler will adjust your code to this specific thing. So people work on this problem. This is one thing.
Yeah, I think some of you are familiar with Python, right? Like if you know one language, work for 5-10 years, you know enough about that language and how this language works, right? And then you can easily adapt to any other language. Like if you know Python, you can work in Julia and vice versa. It's very easy for the programmers. As you touched on this, it depends upon the use cases, right? If your use cases are a little bit of machine learning, there is a language called as PennyLane from Xanadu, and then it's based on, again, like Jupyter Notebook. If you guys are familiar with Jupyter Notebook, you have the Python, and then you have the APIs, and then you can use those APIs to compose your circuit. And in the end, what you're going to do is like submit the circuit, get the result back, and do some post-processing on the classical side. There is always a classical side and a quantum, and then you set up the circuit and you pre-process on the classical side, you submit to the quantum processor unit and get the output back. So there will be like a mix of this for time until we get something like, all of us have access to the quantum hardware, whether it's cloud or on desktop, and some common standard comes and we all follow. It's long road. And the institutes or the agencies have a vital role to play. And if you miss that on the slide, the NIST, the National Institute, which we have here in the US, they are working on 4 algorithms, right? Especially on the encryption side. Now that will be probably going to be a de facto model for all of us on the classical side, how to make your system secure, how to make your classical computer, classical data secure with this 4 algorithm, which is also called a post-quantum cryptography. Right? That was on the right side of the slide. So some of this initiative has started, but there is always a problem with standards on the classical side. When you pick up any industry, automotive, is there a standard? People try, Ford or General Motors will try to get the standard, but everyone has their own aspirations, my standard and industry standards. It takes a long way, to have a standard developed. And same thing will happen on the quantum side. Given since you asked which programming language, I will start with Python. I will start with Qiskit, and then there are adapter or the provider, as we say, we use that to call the quantum processor.
Another point, there are companies that will save the trouble for you. right? So you can partner with consulting companies like Deloitte. They are kind of really geared toward quantum computing, but also other vendors, like if you work with Rigetti or Anki or all these companies, they will offer the services for you. So they will ask you, okay, let's figure out what is the problem that you want to solve. We will recommend, because we know the technology probably better than you do, we will recommend what algorithms to use. We will even write the application, build the entire algorithm for you, and you can use it later on. So it may be kind of like quantum as a service kind of thing. So there is this way to go about it. And there was another thing about like governments and how you play around with this kind of stuff. So here at MIT, we have the Co-Design Center for Quantum Advantage, which is kind of a project by the DoD. They give all the fundings, and there are several groups from MIT, Princeton, UCLA, all those universities, and they work together with Brookhaven National Lab as an example. And you have teams coming from those national labs, from universities, and from the government, and they together try to form those standards. Even the terminology that we're using, right, that you asked about, this is something which is actively being after, right? People are deciding, okay, so for example, when design a classical computer, we use standard cells, right? You don't design everything from scratch all the time. You just use standard cells and stuff. Do we have the analog for it on quantum computers? So yeah, let's call it primitives, and let's start designing primitives. So we can design and build more advanced quantum computers. So there is this effort to standardize a little bit, not everything, but at least to have like a common ground that we can all use in order to make sure that we talk about the same things at all. Right, so it's active process at all. Fine. So the next part, let's start talking about like algorithms, the applications, and IP, of course, because it's still business school. So again, let's see that we mean what we mean when we say each and everything. So the definition of an algorithm is just a finite sequence of steps that you need to do, and you design these steps such that you will get a solution, you'll perform a computation at the end. Like if you want to frame it, you can think about it like this is the theory, this is the science of solving the problem. But once you have all those algorithms, you can start building applications from them. So when we say application here, we mean kind of a software program which uses all those algorithms to create some kind of value, to generate value for the user. A similar thing is like the engineering, right? You came up with a new theory, you know the physics, now let's build something out of it. This is the engineers that are using the theory to implement something. Once you have those applications and algorithms, we can start talking about intellectual property. Right? Because you create something new. Everything here is basically new, all right? And you can create value out of it, and you want to claim rights for this invention, for this creation, right? So this is kind of like the ownership, or like creating an envelope that protects you or gives you this advantage that we mentioned before, right? Once you start investing and playing with this technology, you want to have the advantage for yourself. So this is how IP comes into play. And this is a packed slide, but it's kind of like the recipe of, overly simplified, how you will go about developing an algorithm, right? So classically, you want to solve a problem. So first, you need to define the problem, right? When we did yesterday optimization problem, you need to build your model or write the equation that you need to solve, and define how it behaves. Then you do an analysis for it. So you figure out which tools you need to use, which type of algorithms you can try in order to solve this problem. And then you do what they call like pseudocoding. You don't really write each and every line of code that you have. You kind of generally write, I need to take this part and move it there and then calculate on top of it and multiply with that. So it's kind of like, it's a recipe more than a code, exactly. Then you give it to programmers, they convert it to an actual code. Right, so an example you can see here, let's say I have a list of numbers and I want to sort it in an ascending order, right? This is the problem definition. This is what I want to do. How will I do it? Let's say I can use the notion of ordered pairs, right? In math, we can say something is bigger than something else, right? We have this notion in math, so we can take advantage of it. We can use the numbers value to order them. And what is the pseudocode? What is the recipe? I pick two numbers, I compare their size. If one is bigger, I switch the order such that they will be ordered ascendingly. And I continue until I make sure that all the switches are done. Now a software engineer will come and code it down using whatever programming language we tell him to use, right? This is how it's classically going about. And going over like what you asked before, not all algorithms are equal, right? You can achieve the same thing differently with different resources. So usually we talk about space-time performance. So when we talk about space, you will hear people talking about space. It's how much memory do I need to use, right? Do I need to store all of those big numbers, all those lists in my memory? Do I need to have a lot of memory just to remember stuff when I'm using the algorithm? And the second part is time. Okay, how long will it take? I clicked enter, how long will it take me to get the answer at the end? So these are mainly the two things we care about. And there is this notion like big O notation, and it kind of describes the worst case scenario, right? Let's say again, go back to the ordering my number. If it's the worst thing that it can do, let's say I want it to be ascending and I got the list of numbers in the descending order, right? It's the exact opposite of what I want. Worst case, it will take me this amount of time or this amount of resources. This is what the big O notation stands for. And as an example, we can use an algorithm called merge sort, and it will take big O of n, order of n, which means that if I have n numbers in my list, worst case scenario, I need to check all of those numbers. We can use quick sort. It only takes log of n. So if I have, again, n numbers, then I only need to look at log n of these numbers in order to make sure it's okay. And we have bubble sort, which orders everything regardless of how many numbers I have. It can just like sweep, just get it done. So you see, all these algorithms will get you to the result that you want, but they are using different amount of resources. And it's up to you to decide which one to use, right? For some applications, you might want to go with a slower one because it might take less memory, as an example. So you need to choose which algorithms works best for you. Now, let's try to compare it to some quantum algorithms, right? So we'll walk you through some of the examples of the famous ones, probably heard of. We mentioned them here more than once. The first one, of course, that started all this public commotion, Peter Shor. He's an MIT professor in the math department here. You can meet him. He's a very nice guy. In 1994, he developed his algorithm. And the thing is that, like we mentioned, the byproduct was the fact that you break the encryption. What his algorithm is doing is actually finding periodicity of a function. Again, like we said yesterday, it just happened to be a solution for this problem. It's kind of a coincidence, but it works. All right, so as an example why it's actually so important, the RSA encryption takes advantage of the fact that factoring numbers is hard. So if I give you big numbers and I'll ask you, what is the result of this multiplication? You can do it with a piece of paper and a pen, right? It will take you less than a minute to solve this problem. But if I ask you, what are those two factors that combined together will generally give this number, finding A and B, this is hard, right? The way that computers go about is they say, if A is equal to, what is B? It's not a prime number. If A is 3, what's B? If A is 4. And they really need to go one after the other until you find this factoring. This is why it's so slow. Right? If this number gets really, really, really big, you have a lot of numbers you need to check along the way until you hit the right answer. We mentioned also that it will take time until it will be, quantum computers will be sufficiently powerful and performing in order to make something useful out of it. But in 2012, we were able to factor 15 and 21. Not sure if it's like impressive, but the reason for that was to show that first, the algorithm works, and in a small subset of the problem, the hardware that we have can support this algorithm. So you can get the right answer, and this algorithm actually works. In 2019, we actually scaled up to 35, right? So great advancement. And here I put like the circuit diagram of how you actually implement the circuitry. We don't get into all those details, but you do remember that these are the qubits that we have, right? And they start at 0 state when we initiate the system. These are Hadamard gates. We used them yesterday, right? We move from Z to X bases. And we have a measurement at the end, and after we measure, everything turns classically, so we have those double lines. Grover's algorithm, another one that we mentioned. It was developed in 1996. It was kind of like the second one to hit the public and kind of make an impression. It's a faster way to search unstructured data. So this is an example when we think about crypto mining today, right? Basically what you do when you mine Bitcoin, you have this block of information encoded in SHA-256 or any algorithm you choose, and you kind of need to find the back way of like showing that the block encoded is the relevant one for the information that you want to try and add to the blockchain now. If you can speed up this search of finding the right answer, you can actually simplify mining cryptocurrency. Yes, people can make money out of it. It might devalue some of this money, but think about all the energy and electricity that we currently spend on mining those cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, but that's not really correct, because the whole point of mining cryptocurrency is that you're trying to solve a hard problem so you can compete over the resources. So if you have a quantum solution, it just makes the whole mining solution, current mining solutions redundant. So it's not like it's solving it. We invented a problem that doesn't need to be solved.
No, first of all, I agree that it will change the way we treat cryptocurrency. It might devalue it because now it's much easier to find the answer, so you don't need to go through all this hard work.
Yeah, but the way this cryptocurrency works is that the problem gets harder as there are more resources. The mining rate remains constant. So if you can mine faster, it's just going to be even harder, or it's just going to be redundant and they can throw it away. It's either one of these.
Yeah, but don't think about don't think about the problem that it will create for Bitcoin and how it competes in the market. Think about all the resources we invest now just to make it work, just to keep this blockchain updated, right? All those mining farms, they use tons of electricity, right? If you can simplify it, maybe it will disrupt some of the concept that we have now about cryptocurrency, but it will definitely require less resources to achieve the same goal. Whether it's the right thing to do, maybe not, but it's something that you can do. That's the point. You can use it for this purpose.
I'd love Bitcoin to have a different solution, so I can buy my graphics cards again. That'd be awesome.
Hopefully. Another thing is if you have databases or you have big amount, like big data that you have, tons of data that just floating around there, and you want to find a line within this data set. You want to find certain part in all this big data set. It also has an optimization problem. It takes advantage of something called amplitude amplification, right? If you remember yesterday when we talked about all those states and we said that they have alpha, beta amplitudes before them, you kind of find a way to make one amplitude bigger on the expense of others, and then when you do the measurement, the amplitude squared is, we said, it's the probability to measure this outcome. So if you can make the right one have a bigger amplitude, it's more likely that you measure the right outcome, right? So you get the right answer that you want, and you can even get it with fewer measurements, you can get it faster. This is how the algorithm looks like. This is the circuit for it. And yesterday I tried to draw it on the board, but what's really cool about it is that you say, graphically, this is the right answer that I'm trying to find. This is everything else. So this is garbage for us. You start in a specific scenario, right? You have a starting point that you get, an ansatz, like a first guess. And then visually, the way that it looks like, the algorithm is rotating you around the wrong axis, and somehow it multiplies it and gets you here. And then you do it again. So you started with theta over 2 away from the wrong answer, and now you are 3 theta over 2 away from the answer. And you'll do it again and again and again, and eventually it will converge on the right answer, and you can do it as many times as you want to get your fidelity, to get the certainty and error bars down, but eventually it will converge toward the right answer. And once you'll do the measurement, you're more likely to measure this one if your state of the system is closer to this point, right? So it's nice that Grover algorithm has kind of a visual way of explaining what it's supposed to be doing. Another cool, some more cool examples, VQE we used yesterday in the example when we did the portfolio optimization. VQE stands for variational quantum eigensolver. Variational solving problems, it's a concept coming from physics. It's a way you can treat the problem and kind of dissect it just to get to the right answer. An example of usage for it is to find the ground state of a molecule. Like, for example, like Eric mentioned, we want to come up with a new drug. We want to see how this molecule reacts with the pathogen that we are trying to solve for. Like, you need to know what is the ground state, like how the molecule behaves undisturbed. So this is just an example of an H2 molecule, and we see the topology, like the qubits and their connections, how they look like. And all the black dots are the quantum computer calculations. So you want to figure out what is this minimum point. Once you know this part, you know all the other stuff that you need to know about the molecule and about this substance. QAOA, we mentioned it briefly. It's an algorithm that takes advantage of kind of interaction between a quantum computer and a classical computer. So one gives the other information, do some calculation, shifts it back, do another calculation. It goes back and forth. It's usually used for like optimization problems, the name suggests, quantum approximate quantum optimization algorithm. Again, the problem of min and max cut and all this kind of stuff, they don't have a direct application, but like we mentioned, there are a lot of problems we can map and say mathematically they look like this, so we can solve them and then take the solution and translate back to whatever we care about. So it's kind of like taking a detour, but it gets you to the answer. And HHL, it's it's an algorithm that helps us solve linear equation, and it's also very useful for quantum machine learning. Because if you think about it, quantum machine learning is figuring out all those weights and biases that you want to put on your neural network. When you train your network, you're basically giving it examples and telling it also the answer. And then it adjusts itself all those parameters that you have across the network. You want them to be optimized such that you will have greater certainty with the answer, with the result. So this is an algorithm that can help us train and find those right weights and biases that we need to have in the neural network. And you can train your neural network much faster if you use these methods. Again, we mentioned yesterday that having those algorithms, having all those capabilities, it's nice. Actually, the hard part is, again, thinking about a problem. Okay, I belong to healthcare or industrial goods or telecommunication. What is the problem that I have that I think is worth solving with a quantum computer? And once I identify this one, what is the right way to go about it? Because there are several ways we can try and solve the problem. Maybe one is much better than the other. At the moment, it's most likely trial and error. You will use this approach and maybe that approach, and eventually you will figure out what's right for you. And now, an important part, IPs and patents in general, right? So once you develop the thing, you want to keep the advantage for yourself, right? The natural thing to do is go and write a patent for it. But there are some criteria you need to meet in order to be able to apply for a patent. So, Eric, you know it very well. You invested several years in this industry.
Love to wax philosophical about the topic. It's fun.
Yeah. So first of all, it needs to be statutory, right? This is the definition. It needs to be a process, a machine, a design, something which is more tangible. So you can't file for a patent for having a new way to do a for loop, right? You can't patent a for loop. This is why classical algorithms and software don't write patents, right? They have copyrights, they have trademarks, they have trade secrets. There are other ways to protect your intellectual property, but not a patent. Another thing, it needs to be novel. It needs to be something new that all of us, we didn't know about it before, and it needs to be something new. Now that we know about this patent, we learned something new. It needs to be useful, right? You can't patent a way to, I don't know, mixed hot cocoa if nobody drinks hot cocoa, right? It needs to have some kind of an application. And the last one, it's kind of like a ditchy one. It needs to be non-obvious, which means that it needs to take knowledge and understanding of the field in order to come up with this thing. It's not as if we'll randomly pick someone from the street and tell him, this is the problem, these are the tools, and he can solve it by himself. If he can do it, it's kind of obvious solution. So it needs to be non-obvious one.
That one tends to be the one most argued about.
Yeah.
Filing patents. Is that obvious?
Yeah, because it's really hard to say, like, is it really difficult to solve? Like, is it really non-obvious thing? Like, is it really, like, if it's novel, it's hard to say, yeah, we don't have anything like it in the market, it's new. Does it do something? Yeah, it's useful. Is it non-obvious? This is the harder part to show. But quantum algorithms and applications are patentable. They are different. And yesterday we showed you this diagram, and we didn't spend much time about it, but it is important, right? And the reason is, like Eric mentioned, and we'll see today when we'll use Classics platform, the way that the algorithm will run really depends on which CPU or QPU you're using. So these are all examples from IBM, but you can see that, for example, in this topology, right? Each qubit that we look in the middle is connected to 3 other qubits. So theoretically, you can have 3 ways to entangle this qubit. If we look at this one has 4, and this one only have 2. So if you need to have 3 entanglement, you will probably need to focus on this one. Here you have more choice, more ways you can go about it, right? So because it's really dependent on the architecture and how, or the topology and how it looks like, you're actually building an electrical circuit, not a software. And because we said electrical circuits are processes, they are diagrams, they are machines, because of that, now you can apply for a patent once you develop a quantum application or a quantum algorithm, right? And it creates a lot of unique opportunities for people in the market. So this graph shows the top companies awarded quantum computing patents in the US in the first half of 2022. Obvious one is IBM. This is kind of the business model for them. They develop technology, they file for patents. This is how they make money. You can see Classic here, Google, Intel, Microsoft, IonQ, all those companies. But the second one is actually Wells Fargo. So Wells Fargo was awarded 22 patents in the first half year, and Wells Fargo is a bank. Right? They are the end user, which we mentioned, and still they have more patents than Google and Microsoft combined, which developed this technology. Right? And again, it circles back to what we started with. If you want to start moving and your organization wants to get into quantum, you need to do it now, otherwise you miss these opportunities. And patents are important for 2 reasons, strategically thinking about this problem. Right, first of all, you block competition. You get the first mover advantage, you have the patent, you can use this one. If they want to do something similar, they need to figure out a different way to do it. So it gives you an advantage, a business advantage in the market. Another thing is, you can actually increase your self-valuation, right? If you're a small company, small startup, and you file for all these patents, and later on someone wants to do an M&A with you, or buy, or invest in the company as a venture capital, all of a sudden these patents, they have value, they're worth money, right? So it's it's not an easy way, but it's another way you can add value for the company just by creating a portfolio of patents, right? You don't use it, you don't sell it, you don't do anything with it, you just own the patent, and the company is worth more. Because of timing, because of the way that it works now. And now, Eric?
I just want to add a couple of things on patents. For those who haven't taken a course on patents or haven't yet, right, there's a couple of different ways to protect your intellectual property. There's, of course, patents like we're talking about. There's also copyrights and trademarks, just kind of going over it so we know what we're talking about when we say patents, right? Trademarks are literally protecting the mark of your trade, right? Your company name, maybe an insignia. A copyright is something that's protecting your copy, right? That a specific arrangement of words, that specific code that you wrote out. So when you program classical software, sometimes you end up having to do a copyright instead of a patent because you're copywriting the literal code. If you want to have it be a patent, you need to patent the process that it took to write that code. What was the sequence of steps, not the code itself? Now, when we talk about patents, there's a couple of different types of patents, right? Typically, when anybody talks about patents in media or newspapers and things, they mean utility patents, right? Those are patents that bring some utility, but there's also design patents and plant patents. Mostly Monsanto's filing a ton of plant patents because they come up with new plants, but that is a very specific type of patent that you rarely see, but it exists. Design patents are like the curvature on an iPhone's corner. Like, some companies are real sticklers of this is my exact design, no one else can copy. this design is important to me and my company, and I don't want anybody to replicate it. So that's a design patent, and utility patent is what we're talking about here today, right? That utility, right? That functionality. The process by which you're doing something new, right, has to be novel, inventive. It can't be an A plus B situation that often gets argued, right? The USPTO often say, well, that patent's actually just this patent plus that patent, and so it's obvious, and you have to pay some really good lawyers to say, actually, it's not obvious because they're in totally different fields, and nobody would have seen this otherwise. So that tends to be kind of the battle, and there's some really interesting conversations going on with quantum patents, right? You want to patent in the same way that you have to worry about it with classical software, you have to worry about in quantum software. You want to patent the application, right? The process by which you're putting these algorithms together. You don't want to patent the code itself because that's copyright. And yep, go for it.
So if you're talking about the IP and patent law, to get there, you need to do research. And for research, you need some credits. So I think some of you are familiar with it. If not, AWS has this credit which can be given to the students or faculty or somebody working in the research institutes. Check it out, like AWS Cloud Credit for Research, and it's given at a rolling basis. There's probably 90 days period before you know whether you will be getting that or not. But I think, like, if I'm correct, students, individual students can get up to 5,000. But for the faculty, and if you're working on some research project with them, there is no limit. But experiment and then go and file this IP and patents for your algorithm. I was hearing earlier about the blockchain, quantum and all. ChatGPT is a great tool to inquire some of this thing, but type in quantum money. This is the very latest thing going on in the quantum world. This is the intersection of this blockchain and the quantum. It's all about like how to be secure enough so that your money is not forged. This is a hard problem, and blockchain and bitcoins can be forged. So some of these things are very new, right? Active area of research is going on. And I saw Peter Shore there. They wrote a paper, how to build a quantum money, somewhere around mid of last year. So immediately after probably 3 or 4 months, they have to take that paper back because somebody came up like your whatever you came up with, your proposal for building this quantum money is not accurate. So even a person of a level of Peter Shore, they have to take the paper back. So that tells me like there is a lot of research, a lot of firepower is needed, and students like you will be the flag bearer. So start experimenting, use the cloud for that, and then come up with a novel solution. Write in Archive, Nature Journal, file the IP patents.
And for brevity, the last comment I'm going to make about patenting in general, about quantum, and it kind of loops some of the other discussions we've had so far in the lecture, is we've seen from BCG, from McKinsey, that there's going to be quantum business value certainly within the next 5 years and only growing from there. Patents, utility patents, last 20 years. So what we're seeing right now is a bunch of companies filing provisional patents. They have an idea, they want to have that filing date on the books. They spend the next year kind of fleshing it out, writing the claims language, kind of making sure that they got it all, and then filing their patent. And so there's a lot of interesting, movement going on in trying to patent so that when quantum hits, they have a good patent fence and can block other people from operating in that space, in the space that they're experts in. You want to add?
No, I was just thinking something, but I forgot. So okay.
Yeah.
If I recollect, then I will pass on that.
Totally, but yeah, it's definitely a strategy going on, right? It's an IP strategy in general to patent fence, right? You want to make sure that your ideas are protected, your core technology, your value proposition, and the same thing's happening for quantum, right? Whether or not a company even intends to operate in the quantum space or take advantage of that technology, they're looking at the IP strategy and making sure that no one else can for their core competencies. So it's definitely something to look into.
So what I was about to ask was, like, since I just came today, I was not very sure the mix of the people, whether they are from the MIT engineering side or the Sloan Business School. So I was kind of like tuning my message
Yeah.
so that I don't over say something on the engineering side because it's business. But what is the mix like? Is the mix of?
Well, there's a mix.
Yep.
Show of hands, who's in the business school? Engineering school? All right. Other? What's other up there? What schools are you from?
Well, I'm an undergrad, but I'm trying to double with like CS.
All right. Cool. Yeah, so we got a good mix here. Perfect. Cool. So next I'll go over the classic platform, but large in part what this section is going to be is kind of the future of programming quantum computers, right? So we'll go over a quick recap of what does it take to write quantum software, right? If you're writing quantum software, if you're looking at it, it's a little bit like electronic design, a little bit like assembly language, right? We saw that circuits are Boolean logic, quantum uses kind of these rotational gates. You draw them out almost the same, right? They look very similar to each other, and the same goes for assembly language, right? And the way you kind of have these charts out. This is what kind of quantum computing software looks like, right? These the wires there are your qubits, those blocks are your gates, and to program that in, you use assembly language, and it's very similar to anything you've ever done on a classical computer in assembly language. You're literally telling the hardware step by step what to do each part of the way. Now, what this says is that quantum computing is still in its infancy, right? Circuits are developed at the gate level, right? They're difficult to create, debug, modify, as we saw yesterday. We felt that pain, and they're not portable across hardware vendors, right? If you want to use IBM, you have to use Chasm. If you want to use another software vendor, you need to use their assembly language. It's a little tedious to move between unless you're using some of these other higher level programming languages we'll talk about. And in all honesty, right, large quantum circuits are going to be necessary to solve any kind of real business value. They're not going to be 5 qubits. They're not going to be 2 qubits like we used yesterday. They're going to be hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of qubit programs to be able to run this. Actually, here is the Forbes article talking about, how many qubits will it take to start seeing applications in some of these industries, right? Material design is going to take about 1,000. Drug discovery, right? We need to be in the 1,000 plus 10,000. Right? Finance, we're needing 1 million. Right? We're gonna need larger quantum computers, more qubits to solve business value problems, but it's gonna be real difficult to program them, right? This is what, about 50 qubits? I couldn't program this. I'd certainly get at least one of these gates wrong somewhere at a very minimum. So it's gonna be very quickly impossible to design, right? To debug, analyze it, and run this software in a way that's tenable, right? No one wants to spend 4 months working on a basic program. So what modern programming languages are doing, and modern programming platforms, they're streamlining the development of quantum computers, right? They're making it easier to program by kind of reducing the need to go into assembly languages. And by doing that, they're making it easier to take advantage of some of these larger computers and take advantage of all these really cool quantum applications we've been talking about. But there's a lot of different ways to go about doing that. The way this was done for classical computers, and most everything in quantum, is following right in the footsteps of classical. There's even dialogue about what a quantum internet can look like. And we know what the internet took to become a thing, right? We need repeaters. So we know we need quantum repeaters, but nobody knows what that is. But we know we need it. So a lot of quantum computing is following classical computing footsteps, right? We moved from assembly languages to, like Parminder said, right, to Python and higher level languages. We moved from these manual level gate designs to some of this higher abstracted modeling of circuits.